Mark Wahlberg is a name that is instantly recognizable. Every single person who watches this video, I would bet, has seen at least one of his movies or knows his face from something, be it his billboard topping rap group, Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, his modeling work with Calvin Klein post that, his entry into Hollywood with classics like Boogie Nights, to his current status as a Hollywood A-lister. But with the passage of time comes fading tidbits of history that may make you question your preconceived ideas of a famous person, maybe even of a famous person you really idolize. I think it is healthy to bring those tidbits back into the light every so often to remind us of our personal principles and to give someone the chance to learn something new that they otherwise wouldn't have known about someone they may idolize or respect. This is The Hate Crimes of Mark Wahlberg. Hello, all. You're listening to Movie Weird, where we discuss the strange, curious, and downright weird of the movie world. My name's Jack, and we're kickstarting the very first video of hopefully a long running series called HollyWEIRD. So, why don't you strap in, kick back, and enjoy? I'll begin this video by saying that these incidents Mark has apologized for repeatedly, in separate occasions during the past. He'll probably continue to apologize for them far into the future. However, there is still to this day a debate about whether people should forgive these actions and accept his apology as a sign that he has really changed. Clearly, it is still a very contentious issue that hovers like a ghost over his career. Obviously, the weight of being a celebrity can sometimes bring with it a public expectation that you're somehow more important than the average person. Maybe your rights and wrongs last longer than the average person. Either of these things may stand true to the people who criticize or defend Mark. Who's to say? Let's begin with 2023. Mark Wahlberg is up to present an award at the Screen Actors Guild for Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, a film with a predominantly Asian cast. The choice to have Mark Wahlberg present an award for this movie drew a very sad irony that caught people off guard and left them very, very upset. The reason being is because it is 2023, almost 35 years since a then 15-year-old Mark Wahlberg tried robbing a 35-year-old Vietnamese man holding 2 cases of beer. The Guardian reports that, according to the sentencing memorandum, Mark confronted Tan Lam, excuse the pronunciation, a Vietnamese immigrant, as he was getting out of his car with 2 cases of beer. Wahlberg called Lam a Vietnam fucking shit and beat him over the head with a 5-foot wooden stick until Lam lost consciousness and the rod broke in two. He then ran up to another Vietnamese man, ironically asking for help. When police made their way to the scene of the crime, he proceeded to punch the second man in the eye, and whilst being arrested, he yelled a rolling barrage of racist epithets, some of them including the phrases on the screen now, and once arrested, it was alleged by Mark that he was high on PCP. The New York Post reported in response to a movie Mark Wahlberg starred in called Joe Bell, which I've seen and I thought wasn't bad. It's about a man who walks across the US speaking to people about tolerance as he grapples with the guilt he has for his son who had taken his life prior to the March for Tolerance, that during the aforementioned 1988 hate crime, Mark, in the presence of 2 police officers, said, "You don't have to let him identify me. I'll tell you right now, that's the motherfucker whose head I split open." All words to that effect. He was arrested for attempted murder and eventually charged with a litany of crimes including assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, possession of marijuana, and interestingly enough, contempt of violating a prior civil rights injunction. He was hit with this injunction 2 years prior, in 1986, when, along with a group of other boys, he chased 3 black children whilst yelling, kill thee, and throwing rocks at them. The following day, Wahlberg and co. was involved in harassing another group of black children on a field trip by yelling racial epithets at them and encouraging other white men to join in. Because of this incident, he had a civil action filed against him for violating civil rights. This meant that if he or any of the other offending boys were involved in any racially motivated hate crimes, they would face jail time. It only took 2 years before Mark, in his clearly troubled youth, decided to break that injunction and be charged with jail time in 1988. Some believe the sentence too light for the severity of the attack, as he only served 45 days in jail. It is important to point out that one of the victims of the 1988 hate crime, Ho Trin, excuse the pronunciation, has since forgiven Mark of this incident and is supportive of Mark's appeal to have himself pardoned of these hate crimes. Though it is clear by the reception of his presentation at the Screen Actors Guild that everyone doesn't feel so obliging of Marky Mark's advocacy for himself. Groups came out in droves to argue against the petition of pardon he launched in 2014, feeling himself only hiding behind his fame and using privilege to wipe an ugly slate clean rather than wearing the shame of his past actions. He would later drop the pardon request in 2016, presumably because of the criticism he faced for seeking it, and Mark has since apologized for seeking the pardon in the first place. Shortly after the second hate crime, we would see the beginning of Mark Wahlberg's career, from his music days as a chart-topping artist with Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch's Good Vibrations, to the Calvin Klein underwear modeling that broke him into the mainstream, and the movie roles that followed. This, however, is not where the controversy with Wahlberg stops. Another slightly less famous incident happened in 1992, when Mark was involved in an assault against a 20-year-old security guard. The New York Times reported then, "The rapper Marky Mark faces criminal charges if he does not negotiate a settlement within 2 weeks with a man whose jaw was broken in a fight." The rapper, whose real name is Mark Wahlberg, and a bodyguard were accused of kicking and punching Robert D. Crehan, 20 years old, in an August brawl, the Associated Press reported. Mr. Wahlberg, Mr. Crehan, and other witnesses testified behind closed doors for almost an hour Tuesday before Assistant Clerk Magistrate David Underwood in District Court in Dorchester, Massachusetts. Mr. Underwood told the Associated Press that unless the two sides reach an agreement by December 7th, Mr. Wahlberg and the bodyguard will be charged with assault and battery. Interestingly enough, Mark was quoted as saying about the case that people will do anything for money. Draw from that statement what you will. At the time, it was alleged that the security guard was yelling racial slurs at Mark's bodyguard, who was black. Could this be a desperate attempt by Marky to cast off his history of racial violence and prove himself a warrior of social justice by defending someone from alleged racial abuse? Maybe. You can think of that what you will, but it still stands. Robert Crehan was allegedly punched and kicked on the ground and ended up in hospital with a broken jaw and a wired mouth, much like Jake Paul. Mark had clearly not shed his capacity for violence by the time he was entering into Hollywood. Mark has also had some pretty serious faux pas in the past. More recently, in 2012, he spoke about how if he were on the planes during 9/11, then it wouldn't have gone down the way it did. Implying, I guess, he would have Jack Ryan'd every terrorist on the plane. Which plane he doesn't explain, no pun intended. Maybe it is all four of them, who knows. This comment of his sparked outrage and also led to what I think is his role in Lone Survivor. If true, I find that funny because he's deciding to rehabilitate his image by doing a movie that tells a largely fictional story about an insertion of 4 SEALs into an area to stop terrorists, in response to him telling a counterfactual anecdote about stopping terrorists on 9/11. Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, folks, honestly. In conclusion, I pose a question to you all. Should we be held responsible for the stupid actions we do as children, whether through our confusion about growing up, our influences and surroundings, or finally our rearing as a child? Mark Wahlberg's past is stained with some serious markings. But should he be expected to be marred with that stainage for the rest of his life? Or should we look at his conduct and achievements and say he's done more good than harm? You tell me. Thanks for watching.